Hey guys, Tanya Rubin with our Wine Country Realtor, and today we are live at Chapin Winery with winemaker Steve Chapin. Super glad to be here. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for visiting us. I appreciate it.
It is such a beautiful little spot. For those of you who have not been to Chapin, if you continue down the Rancho California Road, it will turn into Warren Road.
Correct.
And off that little beaten path, not too far, you will find Chapin and Doffo and
Chapin Family Vineyards.
Chapin Family Vineyards, and that's where we are today. So Steve,
Yes.
Tell me, how did you end up in Temecula at Chapin Family Vineyards?
Well, it's a long short story, and I'll try to make it a short story.
All
for
the
you.
best ones. I've never found one that was just like, oh.
Well, he long ago,
Okay.
This is way back in 1987, my dad retired, and he had a dream of building his own home.
Okay.
And so he found a piece of property, and he wanted me to come out and look at it. And
Okay.
so we met the owner, who owned almost all of the parcels around here, around this area. And so we went to lunch, and he bought the parcel across the street, which is now Doffo Winery.
Okay.
And I bought the parcel across the street from him, which is now Chapin Family Vineyards.
And what about your parents?
My parents came there and
Okay.
built a home.
Okay.
Built a home. My dad's still alive.
So
and
they got their dream.
They got their dream home, and they sold it to Marcelo Doffo in 1998.
But you just fell in love on that initial visit?
Yes, I
That
love the...
You adopted your parents' dream?
Well, sort of, but it was so far. I mean, when you came out here back in 1987, 88, we were so far in front of the curve as far as development was concerned.
Absolutely true.
And so when they built their house and I built this one a couple years later, if you could imagine a house on the plains of Kansas, that's what it looked like. There was just nothing around here.
And that's what it felt like?
Yeah, it felt like that.
Oh,
you know,
my
it was
goodness.
like a thumb sticking up on the prairie.
So where did you come from originally?
And well, I still live there. I am in Carlsbad, California.
Okay.
And that's my home.
Okay.
And that's where I continue to live at.
Okay.
And I just feel like I have the best of two worlds.
I think you actually might.
The coastline
beach,
and the country.
The coastline and the wine countryside.
Yeah, wine country, exactly.
And the foresight to come here when it wasn't developed yet and be part of that development.
Yeah, you could see the potential in Temecula, which is I've been out here now since 1989, 91 on a very consistent basis, and I have to say that the community of Temecula City, the city of Temecula and the Valley is a very, very nice place to live at.
It is beautiful. So you spend how much of your time in Temecula?
Actually, I spend more time out here than I do in Carlsbad, which is 5 days a week. I'm out here 5 days a week, sometimes more, obviously, when we have a lot going on. But I spend a lot of time out here, more than I'm sure more than 50 hours of working time out here a week.
More than you thought you would probably.
Probably, yeah, definitely, definitely.
So how did you go from purchasing what I'm guessing at the time was relatively raw land,
Yes,
to becoming a winemaker and a winery owner?
well, way back in, it doesn't seem that long ago, but way back in 2004, I retired from my company that I was working for, Roche Diagnostics, and our specialty was blood chemistries, as far as instrumentation,
So really
supplies.
close to winemaking.
Blood chemistry and wine chemistry. Yeah, pretty
Well,
close.
chemistry is actually, there's the common
There
thread.
is, there
Yes.
is. I have to say that
But
blood
it
is
is
much
a
more
world
complex.
apart.
It is a world apart.
Yes.
But chemistry is chemistry, and wine chemistry is different than blood chemistry. You know, so but anyway, that's where it. Really all started, and I decided to take a year off. I was in upper management at Roche, and I wanted to take a year off and just to see if I wanted to go back into the industry or continue on with something else.
Okay.
And in that year, I planted 10 acres of grapes and built that building across. You can't see it on the camera.
In your year off.
In my year off.
In your retirement, I'm going to take a little break.
I
and
built
stop
these other two
working.
buildings and put in the vineyard, and that was the beginning.
That's all.
And it really took me the next 6 or 7 years developing it and getting through all the permits and what we call with the county of Riverside the plot plan, what you're going to do out here, where the fire lanes are, where the parking is, and that took a long time, along with a lot of money as far as permits are concerned. And that's where it began, and we opened
Riverside
up.
County is not necessarily famous for their ease of.
No, and I still not. It's not an antagonistic type of situation.
No, it's just a lot of procedures.
A lot of procedures and a lot of money, and we are now working with the Riverside County again to further expand the winery.
Oh, so what's on the horizon?
On the horizon is a new processing building, which is 5,000 square feet. And everything will go in there, and then eventually, when I say eventually, that may be a long eventually, is a restaurant.
Okay.
Out here in front where the parking lot is.
So eventually, when you say a long eventually, because you took a year off for vacation and built a winery.
Right.
So is that like a year eventually?
No,
or like
no.
a 10-year eventually?
Realistically, it's a 10-year horizon.
Like a 10-year plan.
Because I do not know the restaurant business, and when we decide to build, that has a major step for this winery,
Sure.
this little winery. And so it's a very complex decision, so not easily made, but at least it's in the plot plan. I do not have to go back to Riverside County and get approval for the restaurant.
We have approval. Well, and that makes sense because this is the side that they have some future hotel development slated for.
Yes.
And so as that develops, being able to offer alternatives.
Right. 12
like
Oaks, which is a major development across the street, which includes a winery, restaurants, hotels, and even housing development.
That's the Marriott.
The Marriott Hotel,
what's planned
yes,
for that.
is eventually going in.
Eventually.
I don't know. I do not know what the timeline is. I used to talk to the owners, and I haven't seen them for probably a year now. So,
Okay.
but they're expanding over there, so that's good news.
And
They're vineyards.
You kind of you'll benefit from that exposure.
More traffic. We need more traffic. One of the nice things about Temecula, you can be really in the country, but we have excellent traffic patterns out here as far as customers are concerned.
I think that's one of the things that first really impressed me about the region when I came as a visitor prior to moving here was from a wine visiting experience. How really nice it was to be able to come and just be able to bop all the way around all the different wineries, having visited Santa Rosa, having visited Napa, having visited some of the other wine regions, or many of the other wine regions in California. It always seemed like everything was so far away, and it was an hour or half an hour to the next winery. And here you can really be like literally across the street.
Right.
And if not across the street, 4 or 5 minutes away.
Yes.
To another 18 choices.
Right. You are, the wineries are all very, very close together.
And a lovely spectrum of different types of experiences within that.
Yes, large, small like me, and medium-sized wineries with restaurants, without restaurants. I mean, it's just a wide, broad spectrum to choose from.
Well,
and
that
experience.
Sort of puts us into one of my favorite questions, which is about favorites. So, when you are tasting or going out for an experience that does not involve Chapin,
okay,
where is your favorite, one of your favorites, or say 3 of your favorites, so you don't have to pick one, favorite spots to go and taste wine?
Here in the valley.
Yes.
Here in the valley. Okay. Well, I think there's more than 3 of obviously.
Sure.
but maybe because sometimes you want to go where you're comfortable and friendly, and so Palumbo, he's always helped me out in many ways. And Wiens does an excellent job. There's no question about that. And if you want just a lot more, you might say, activity or whatever, you go to Wilson, I guess. And so I think that covers the whole spread from small to large. And of course, my good friend Marcelo Doffo across the street. I can't leave him out. He does an excellent job over there.
Nice.
And so we're good friends, and so I need to mention him. So,
Otherwise, he might start throwing little darts across the way. They are really right next door to one another. You can almost park in one lot.
You can, and we welcome that.
And walk back and forth. I wasn't sure about that, so that's good to know. So visit, park once and visit twice.
Yeah, my parking lot is considerably larger than his, and so we're all very sensitive to the parking issues out here. But with the expansion of the winery, guess what? We're required to expand the parking lots. So the parking will only improve in the future. So don't hesitate not to come out here because of the parking.
I haven't found parking to be a big issue when visiting most of the wineries. Every now and then when there's an event, some of them will get, which one is it on Rancho that always seems, Meritage? Callaway?
Callaway, Callaway.
There's one where you have to, it's one of the few I haven't been to. Okay. And I know that I always hear people talking about the parking. So
really?
I can honestly claim innocence in not knowing exactly who it is. But there's one down on the entrance towards the front of Rancho.
Well, that sounds like Callaway.
But I've been to Callaway and I've never had trouble parking.
Yeah.
So I don't know. Okay, we digress. So, what about when you're eating in wine country? Do you have favorite spots for food?
Avensole, I've never been disappointed by Avensole. If you want to have a nice, you might say, winery restaurant experience, I think Ponte does an excellent job with their patio. So those are the two top ones that come to mind. But Wilson has an outdoor patio kind of restaurant that's very delightful and always busy. Yeah. So they do a good.
I think they have one of the best brunches.
I've heard that. I have not experienced that, but I understand that it's excellent.
They do an excellent brunch.
So I mean, I can't think of one restaurant. There's not that many restaurants out here, but I can't think of one where you'd be disappointed. You know.
I'd agree with that. I've experienced a number living out this side of town, and
I'm just going through them in my mind right now.
They all offer very different. A good chunk of them offer very different experiences from one to the other, and yet most of them do a very good job. And that's another unique characteristic I think about visiting Temecula wine country as well, is that when you go to Napa, when you go to some of the other regions, it's very unusual to have the food and wine pair.
Yeah.
Your tasting room experience would be much more typical, where you just go and do your wine tasting.
Right.
But here there's a number of spots where you can actually have a little meal and prepare yourself for the next round of wine tasting. For sure.
No, but the Valley is excellent, I think, as far as dining, is concerned. It's just very comfortable in all the spots, I think.
I agree. I look forward to the day when on Tuesday night in wine country we have many choices. As out in wine country, if you're not familiar, a lot of the restaurants are not open later into the evening, and so if you want to eat in the evening and you live out in wine country, you go into town all 8 minutes. Into town.
Exactly.
Which, again, it's only a few minutes, but we feel like we're going into town.
Right. I mean, I always tell people, as we said here on our patio right now, you look out, and of course you can't see this on camera, but it's wide open. I mean, I see one house and lots of vineyards, and that's about it. And yet, as you said, 10, 15 minutes in, you've got 165,000 people that live in the city of Temecula. So it's the best of two worlds. It really is.
Now, do you spend a lot of time exploring in Old Town or any of those spots in
Yes. I try to experience it. Guests come in from town, and so we usually try to take in dinner in town. It's just nice to walk in Old Town and have dinner. And if you're going to the theater, that's an absolute. To have dinner there in town. Because,
absolutely. Do you have any favorite Old Town spots?
1909? 1909? Of course, Gourmet.
Gourmet Italia?
Yeah, Gourmet Italia. That's not really in town,
not quite
in Old
on
Town.
On the edge, it's close.
And then a new one. They do an excellent job. I know the owners.
Latitude?
No, Nightengale.
Nightengale.
Yeah, very nice.
Very nice.
Very nice building. Pretty easy parking, right next to the parking garage. So
that is very easy parking. I have not tried that one yet.
It
I'll
is
have to
really
add
nice.
that.
The building is beautiful. Absolutely gorgeous building. Yeah.
Awesome. Now, when we go into circling back to the winemaking a little bit,
Right.
tell me a little bit about that experience and about learning the craft and how you moved from having the vineyard into.
Well, I believe being in corporate life for a long time, sometimes it's good to get a good consultant to help you, because it allows you to accelerate and learn fast, number one, and number two, it prevents you from making a lot of mistakes that you would
Anything you can do to shorten your learning curve.
Exactly, and then
that's
learned.
wisdom for life, right?
It is.
It
I
really
mean, a lot of people don't want to spend money on consultants, but sometimes they can save you a lot of money in errors in the long run.
Right.
You know, and so I have, I think, two of the best, which is Dr. Enrique Farrell, who helps me out here. Has 50 years of hands-on experience with winemaking, and he's a consultant. Almost on retirement now, but he's been with me for at least 10 years.
Wow.
10 years, and then Alec Mayhall, who is a horticulturist, who helps me with the vineyard. So I try to have those two people there so I can bounce things off when there's an error or a trap or something like that. And it's always nice to be able to bounce it off of people.
No, when you did run into things, you had your kind of
Yes,
executive.
yes.
What do I do next?
Yes, and sometimes just reading about it in the book is not sufficient. You got to have somebody that has both the actual education, but also the hands-on experience
Sure.
that have incurred all those issues or whatever. So I learn, and then people say, how do you learn all this so quickly? It's not so quickly. I mean, if you immerse yourself in anything for 5, 6, 7 years, you'll learn it. You'll learn it. You know, that's the old 10,000 hour.
Right.
You become an expert after 10,000 hours, no matter what you are, and everything. And so I do a lot of hands-on. I have an assistant winemaker that helps me out, but basically, between, I guess, the three of us, Dr. Enrique Farrell and Christine, my assistant winemaker, and myself, we can do a pretty good job. Our protocols are pretty detailed, and I think we have state-of-the-art equipment for making wine, good wine. So.
Now, how did you go about, I think one of the things that often holds people back from hiring the consultant is that fear of hiring the wrong person and, you know, kind of making a poor choice, and then now you've got the wrong person leading you.
Yeah.
So how did you go about feeling confident with the people that you did end up working with?
Well, I think Dr. Enrique Farrell just had a reputation that was pretty immaculate, and he had been a winemaker for more than a few wineries out here on top of everything else. So he had a real history here in the valley, and you only have to talk to him for a while to know that he knows it all. He really does know it all, and so it really
Don't tell his wife
that. Exactly. And then for Alec, the horticulturist, he's a little bit younger guy out of Cal Poly, but very knowledgeable and a lot of hands-on experience too. So he specializes in avocados and vineyards. So it's he picks up both. Both of them are challenging crops, to say the least.
Sure.
You know, they really are.
I think the crop of the wine, the grape crop, has been something that has tortured people for many a century.
Well, really, and of course it's been, for the last few years, it's been challenging out here in Temecula because we've had some very hot days in the springtime that's done a lot of damage. So we're kind of learning how to deal with those hotter elements, I should say.
And how was because I know last year we had I'm really curious to see how 2008 fares, because we had a particularly challenging spring because, if I'm not mistaken, we warmed up and then we cooled back down again.
Right.
And so there was a lot of the vineyards experienced a false start.
Right.
A regression.
Yeah. We in the last few years, we've had 1 or 2 hot days that, and when I say hot, I mean upwards of 110 degrees, and when the grapes are very immature, they can be severely damaged. And so most of us lost some percentage of our crop in 2018.
Yeah, I've heard,
And it could be all the way from 5-10% all the way up to 50%, depending on the varietal, which is the type of grape it is. And then for us, we had a long growing season. The grapes just did not mature very quickly, and so we were harvesting in very, very late September, early October, which is unusual. So it was a challenging year. Although the grapes themselves looked pretty darn good, the wine came out pretty darn good.
That's the really important thing.
And so, with 2 years, you can't really tell everything right at this moment, but as time goes on, because we, age our wines and barrels for 2 years.
Right.
And so that's the key point as they mature.
One of the things I was fortunate to have a conversation with Nick Palumbo, one of the gentlemen you mentioned earlier, one of their wineries, and he mentioned in our conversation that one of the key things that he felt that was transforming Temecula, or responsible for the transformation, was the actual storage of the wine during that winemaking process. That had really matured in the valley. Have you?
I mean, environmentally,
yes.
It matured.
Yeah,
yes.
And the conditions,
right?
All the facilities that you were talking about, that infrastructure. That
right. Well, I think we do, as far as here at Chapin, as far as the buildings and as far as the environment for the wine itself, we are very careful with that. But there is some optimal things to do, and one of the key elements is to have a barrel room that's cold enough to it. Sometimes because of the heat in the buildings and the cost factors, but a good wine should be stored as far as barrels are concerned, right around that 62-degree point.
Yeah.
And in the mid-August, sometimes that's pretty hard to keep it down at 62 degrees. And barrels. Barrels are critical. I mean, you want steady temperatures on your bottle storages and everything, but really barrels you want to keep cooler for stability.
Right, and yes, you're right. In August, when if we have one of those little heat snaps here that never ever happens.
Yeah, 62 degrees. 62 degrees inside the barrel room will seem like winter when it's hot out here, sort of thing. So it's and our new building that we will be building will be state of the art, and a lot of let's say comprehensive examination as far as having a building that we can hold the temperature at 62 degrees.
I'm guessing a lot of insulation.
Well, it's going to have, actually, it's a new process called Fostra, which is really foam-filled concrete.
Okay.
And so it'll be about 12 inches. So it'll be thick. And of
that'll
course,
help
concrete.
maintain probably lessen the cost of air
absolutely.
conditioning.
Once you get the temperatures down on concrete, it really does hold the temperatures very well.
Yeah.
So that's something that we've looked at for a long time and talked to a lot of other people who outside the valley here that have these type of structures, and they're very effective. And then along with maybe a good solar system to help the bottom line will be advisable too.
That sounds like all good ideas. But I can imagine that having that temperature and maintaining
when you want a temperature, let's say downwards of 62 degrees in a 5,000 square foot building, that's challenging.
Yeah, and costly.
And costly.
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, I was going to say, we're fortunate that we do, that was what it was, that we do cool off here most nights.
Yes.
In the summer as well. So
absolutely.
That does help, and I'm sure that would come into play with the concrete.
You've got an optimal. As I said, sometimes when you get the temperature down in concrete buildings, once you get the temperature down, it doesn't take a whole lot of energy to hold it there. But you got to get it down there initially.
Yeah, and having that thick bunker away from the sun.
Exactly.
Super key to that.
Yes, and it's going to be well located over here.
So, do you guys, circling back into Chapin a little bit more in terms of the actual front end of the winery, which is kind of where all the fun stuff happens, right?
The retail part of it, you mean?
Well, okay, maybe not. The fun stuff all happens in the winemaking room, but the activity and the retail and what are your favorite wines right now that you're drinking here at the winery?
At the winery right now, well, people ask me that oftentimes, and I always just try to disguise it in terms like that. They're like like kids, you know, you're not supposed to have any favorite when you have a bunch of kids, but there's always ones that
The
come.
one that's open on the glass and the glass in front of me?
That's about it.
That one?
But right now, technically speaking, our Syrahs, our Cabernets are just excellent right now. They have maturity. They've been in the bottle for about a year now, and that's what we're trying to do. Before we release a bottle of wine, we want about a year in the cellar.
Okay.
And that really adds a lot of body and richness and mid-palate richness to the experience of tasting the wine. Of course, we grow 2 Italian varietals out here, Montepulciano and Aglianico. Those are wines that have a little bit less fruit than our typical Syrah or Cabernets, but have a little bit more structure, but they're excellent with food. But I have to say that our Cabernets and our Syrahs are just really living up. You understand why, after a while working with Cabernet a lot, you understand why it's the king of wines, because it is absolutely a beautiful grape. Right now in California, there's about 89,000 acres, which puts it in the #1 position as far as the most common grape growing.
Oh.
Yeah, so
That's very
and then
interesting.
Syrah's right behind
And
that.
how do the Cabernets grow in the Temecula Valley? How does our region suit?
Well, I think to grow a good Cabernet grape, you have to have a lot of intense farming. And intense farming means what is keeping a good, steady, controlled canopy on it, keep about 50% sun on the grape clusters, and just making sure that you don't have clusters stacked upon clusters, so there's good air circulation around. So maybe a little bit of fruit thinning, a little bit to make sure that the fruit ripens evenly.
So Cabernet is not just about the climate, it's also about how it's being farmed and how
You've got
and a little bit of a higher maintenance grape to grow. Maybe you
It
can't
is.
just let
Well,
it go.
all of our farming procedures or methodologies are really intense and very labor intensive. But
Is
I
that
think
because
it pays
of
it.
our region, or is that because of just the grape in general?
Well, I think part of it is the discipline that Dr. Enrique Ferro has put on us. That to have a good, for example, on our vines, our cordon, that's the part that controls or holds the canes to the grape clusters and everything. That canopy, he says, should be somewhere between 16 and 18 square feet. And so that's where he likes to see it at. And if you look at our vines in the midsummer, you'll see they look like hedges, carved hedges. And I think all of that is the key to trying to grow a good grape. And of course, in the wintertime, composting and making sure that you fertilize correctly and everything. So just a lot of work.
It's just fascinating when you get deep into like those specifics.
Because I found that it really helps you. It makes a much easier job to make good wine when you have good grapes. Life is so much easier, and in fact, it's worth investing a lot of time and money into your vineyard, so that those grapes, when it's time to be harvested, are excellent the best they can be. Let's say that.
And the better they are, the better the
wine
juice
will
they
be.
make, the better.
Exactly, and you can see how it develops because we have like nine different blocks here, and some of the blocks do perform better than other blocks. Sometimes it's the varietal, sometimes it's where the block is, but you can see there's a difference.
How much land are you farming here in Chapin?
We're farming right here, farming 10 full acres of vineyards right here. But we have another vineyard.
Okay.
This here vineyard sits at 1,650 feet. The other vineyard that we farm totally sits at about 2,700 feet.
Oh, so much higher.
And much higher. And they produce our Syrah.
And where's that located?
It's down by Di Portola.
Oh, okay.
And on the end of it's Rock Creek is what it's labeled as, all the way down to the end of Glen Oaks.
Oh, okay.
Up there. Sometimes when you're driving down there, you'll see the vineyard on top of the hill there. It sits up on top of the peak of a hill, so it gets good sun exposure, good air circulation from the wind, and a little bit cooler air up there at 2,500 feet.
Very interesting. So are all of the bottles that you're producing here from the grapes grown on those 2 spots, or do you sometimes have to supplement?
We buy grapes.
Okay.
We buy a little. We grow Viognier here on the property, but we don't have very much. But we buy a lot of times Chardonnay grapes, and make Chardonnay, and that was really about the only one.
Just to add to your white
Sauvignon
mix.
Blanc. We bought in Sauvignon Blanc just to have some white varietals, because we like to have a ratio of about 30% of our wines being white wines and the rest being red wines.
And then do you do a sparkling at all, or
Not at this time.
Not at this time. Is that because it requires different equipment, just not your
Different equipment,
not your...
and especially different bottling equipment. That's
Okay.
the key, and that's quite an investment.
Yeah. Now, when you started, did you have everything, or were you, not everything? I'm sure you
Yeah.
never have everything, but did you kind of have your basic equipment?
Well-
or did you sort of? A lot of the wineries, when they get started, have these great stories of community where other wineries have helped them through different.
Well, obviously, that's one of the financial challenges of owning a winery, is that you have to put up a lot of front capital to buy tanks and equipment. Fortunately, I have a very good neighbor across the street, Marcelo Doffo.
We may have mentioned him once or twice.
And we both shared in the cost of a press. We shared even in some pumps. We shared.
So you have some equipment that you really fully
de-stimmer.
own together and share together.
We shared it for about 5 years, and then we got so big we had to get each of us had to get not only bigger equipment but our own equipment
Your
too.
own equipment.
So it was a nice
couldn't
step.
have the time to share.
Right, exactly.
Because the grapes only are.
Exactly. So it was always a little bit. But when we were small, there was no problem.
Right.
But when you got bigger, that was a much more of a challenge. So it was time, and so we sold that equipment to another winery, and
Here in Temecula?
Here in Temecula, and then we went out on our own, and
Okay.
kind of equipment-wise, and so we stepped into it pretty rapidly as far as equipment
So
standpoint.
equipment-wise, your community story is really of having someone close to you that was in a similar size and need.
Yes, so we put all the equipment on casters, and so we could roll the equipment back and forth across the street without loading it on trucks. So it's pretty convenient, to tell you the truth.
Yeah, no,
Yeah,
and it's
yeah.
just funny because in my mind I'm giggling because I can picture, 10 o'clock at night in the middle of harvest, rolling over the de-stemmer because Marcelo,
That's really about what it was like too.
because it's never like perfect. Oh, 2 o'clock on Tuesday. Oh yeah, that's perfect. It's all, I'm sure, always on the fly and like, oh wait, we don't have this. Grab it next door.
Yeah, exactly. And then as you learn more and more about wine making, and by the way, it's not difficult to make wine. It's really difficult to make good wine. So
I make wine in my refrigerator regularly.
Yeah,
Exactly.
and so as you get more sophisticated in what you want to do, you have to have more sophisticated equipment.
I'm joking because I made some elderberry syrup, and we take that in our family for immune boosting. And it's honey and elderberries
Right.
steeped together
Right.
with some ginger and cinnamon. And my son said his throat was tickling the other day. I'm like, oh, grab some elderberry. He's like, Mom, it's turned to wine.
Fermented, even in
in
a refrigerator.
In the refrigerator.
Wow. It might not be bad. Well, we don't know. Be
Maybe
careful.
it has some additional medicinal benefits.
It might. It's amazing.
But
It's
yeah,
amazing.
so making it good is the real key. And then the criteria of good.
Yes. Well, that's the human experience. That's what makes wine tasting more interesting. I think as far as that part of it is, it's very subjective. What you may
Absolutely.
like, Tanya, I may not like, and vice versa. But that's the beauty of it is, because if we all made the same exact Cabernet all through the wine country, why would you go to various wineries?
Why bother going to
Yeah.
taste one to another?
Yeah, exactly. So they're all different, and all winemakers, you can go down the road here and talk to each winemaker, and each of them does it a little bit differently as far as the protocols for their fermentation experience.
And when you talk about, you were talking about the Syrahs being really great right now. Do you have in the field, do you have a grape that's your favorite to cultivate?
Yes, and it took me a long time to learn how to cultivate it, but we have an Italian varietal called Aglianico.
Okay.
And it has a great history in Italy. Actually, it goes all the way back to the time when Spain occupied late 1520 when it was first mentioned in the literature.
Wow.
And it grows nice and evenly here. It also tolerates the heat really well, and it has a beautiful color when you actually make the wine.
Oh,
Yeah,
so that is one to try.
Yeah,
And
it pairs
check out.
beautifully with those big pastas.
Does anyone else grow Aglianico in the valley? I feel
I
like
think Cougar does.
That's what
I think Cougar does, and
I feel like
I don't know who. I think there's a couple more
couple
small
more.
growers, but you know when I mentioned the 89,000 acres on
the
the Cabernet, you'll be lucky to see maybe 1,500 acres total grown in all of California of Aglianico. So it's a little bit rare as far as that's concerned, but I just wanted a nice, different type of wine for my menu.
I like that, and I like that, you know, finding a wine that also, or a grape that grows and tolerates the heat well is probably a really
And that's what a
important-
consultant will get for you. And that was right at the very beginnings of the vineyard
Oh,
that we
really?
made those decisions, because it's a real investment, and you can't rip them out year to year. You know, it's too expensive to do that. So, and it takes 3 years to develop a grapevine into good production.
So that you can actually harvest.
Harvest and make a
there's-
decent wine.
Now,
Exactly.
Have you experimented at all with, when you've planted new, with buying the more mature vines out of the 2-year vines and plant? Have you done any of that?
Well, all of our, there's 2 ways of buying vines, and that is in the dormant stages, which they look like sticks when you get them in. The other is what we call green vines, and that's when they put them in the hothouse or the greenhouse for 6 months, and they'll all leaf out before you receive them. So you know they're viable when you receive them.
Which
And-
has a plus.
Right, and so right now we're going into we have one plot, or of grapes that we think are vines that are outstanding, and we're actually germinating those, or I shouldn't say germinating, but propagating them from the canes themselves, and so that's a big project this year, to grow very mature vines on our own rather than buying from a nursery.
Fun.
Yes,
We'll have to
it's
check
exist-
back in and see how that experiment.
Well, this project, we're going to start this winter, because obviously everything is dormant. But we figure this is a solid 3-year project we're moving into. So
Interesting. Well, the reason I asked that is because I know over at Gershon, they did plant some more this year, and they opted to plant a 2-year-old vine.
Okay.
Instead of that sprouted.
Right.
And because it wasn't a very large area, they thought that they would experiment with that to see if it would move them into the fruiting stage faster or not. So
no, I think those are all logical things. But
to
that's,
try, right?
But
And in a
that's
smaller
But
plot.
I have to tell you, when you buy them from the nursery like that, 2 years old, they want a lot of money for them.
Well, and I've understood as well that with the fires that we've had and some of the things that have been impacting California as a general region, and some of the wineries getting wiped out in our northern sister territory, that I've heard that the availability of grapes has been
Grapevines or
grapevines,
grapevines?
yeah. Has
Yes,
been-
I'm sure that they're doing a lot of replacement. The fires up north, overall, the problem hasn't been so much as damage to the, as far as fires in the vineyards, but smoke damage on the
Damaging
vines.
crops.
That damages
Yeah.
the crops. And that does get into your grapes. And then you got one or two procedures you have to do to get the smoke taint.
Oh, you can actually.
And there's some methodologies to
That's
take
what
it
you're
out.
consultant.
Yes, yeah. Good old. I won't say. There's just different methodologies, and obviously we don't have that problem down here, so I don't have any experience with that smoke taint removal procedures.
Cool. So this week, Temecula had some very fun news, being listed in the Wine Enthusiast magazine as one of the top places to visit for wine regions.
It's good to hear us being recognized by Wine Spectator, right?
Wine Enthusiast.
And Wine Enthusiast.
Yes.
Wine Enthusiast. I read the article and everything, and it was short and to the point, but we were in a position of 1 of 10. And the other locations were around the world. There wasn't something that was, California.
Just California, where maybe there's not. I wonder how many wine regions do we have technically in California?
Oh, ABAs,
Yeah,
a lot.
that's a whole
lot.
different. Well, we can have a whole conversation just on that. But so staying on that article, but expanding a little bit, and then we'll wrap up. I know you have some wine to go make. But what do you see, you know, as we've been getting more acknowledgement and getting recognized and have brought the quality of the wine up, where do you see the future for the Temecula Valley?
I think it's
Look with your crystal ball.
Yes, I think it only will continue to improve. We have 40 plus wineries out here at the present time, and we are rapidly becoming more and more recognized, not only from the Southern California community, but all of the Western United States. It's surprising how often people come out here and they inform me that they're from the East Coast, but they were recommending Temecula Valley or a particular winery to visit. And so the word is steadily getting out. And as we get newer and larger developments out here as far as wineries are concerned, you'll just see more and more people visiting, and that's just, I think it's very promising, to say the least.
And very exciting to be a part of it.
Because people don't realize that Temecula is probably the one aspect, characteristic of it, Temecula is very unique in the world, and is that we're surrounded within 90 minutes of this location of 23 million people. There's no place else in the world that has a wine area that is that close to that size of population. So it's very promising in the future.
Very accessible for all of those 23 million people.
Very accessible.
And have a day trip or a weekend trip without spending 8 hours in a vehicle.
There's no question that Temecula will be a destination point in Southern California, and certainly for the Inland Empire out here. But it will be a place to visit, like, you know, San Diego, Palm Springs, Disneyland, and Temecula Valley for the wine.
Well, I'm happy that we had this time to talk.
Well, thank you for coming out.
Thank you so much for your time and energy. And if you guys know anyone who wants to learn more about Temecula winemaking and the environment here in Temecula, please share this video with them. Go ahead and like it, share it, and come out and visit the beautiful region of Temecula wine country. Can't wait to see you. Thank you again, Steve. And I'm going to lean forward and say goodbye.
Thank you, Tanya.